is under attack. Russia is waging an economic war. Russian gas supplies to Europe are down by 80%. Russia could single-handedly push Europe into...
Vladimir Putin is blaming Europe for its current energy crisis. He says the continent was wrong to reduce the share of long-term deal.
Russia-Ukraine war. President Vladimir Putin has once again denied allegations of Moscow being the reason behind a brewing energy crisis in Europe.
Putin humiliates the European Union through gas by exposing a dependency built over decades. This was never sudden. Europe tied 40 to 43% of its natural gas to one supplier and called it strategy. Industrial planning, heating systems, and infrastructure all assumed endless flow. The result was predictable leverage, public shock, and manufactured outrage when reality finally arrived.
Saying that if Europe wants more gas, it should immediately lift sanctions that is preventing the opening of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline.
I look at Germany, Italy, Austria, and half of Central Europe, and I see economies designed around the assumption that Russian gas would always arrive on time, at scale, and without disruption. Industrial output, household heating, power generation, all calibrated to uninterrupted flows from one direction. That is not resilience. That is habit dressed up as policy. Once factories, grids, and homes are built around that assumption, walking away stops being a decision and starts being a fantasy.
Another factor is the practice of our European partners. This practice has once again confirmed that in fact they made mistakes. We talked to the European Commission's previous lineup, and all its activity was aimed at phasing out of so-called long-term contracts.
By 2021, more than 155 billion cubic meters of gas moved annually from Russia into Europe. That figure was not hidden. It was not disputed. Everyone knew it. Diversification became a conference word, something repeated at summits, written into white papers, and ignored in construction plans. Pipelines, terminals, and grids kept reinforcing the same physical reality. Steel and concrete do not care about press releases. Infrastructure locks behavior in place for decades.
Putin blamed what he called the green agenda for the energy crisis in Europe and insisted that Russia would fulfill its energy obligations despite the ongoing conflict.
Long-term infrastructure decisions sealed the outcome long before anyone started shouting about crises. Pipelines last longer than political careers. Storage systems reflect past assumptions, not future hopes. When leaders talk about surprise today, I hear selective memory at work. The humiliation started when Europe built an energy system that could not pivot quickly without pain. Everything that followed simply exposed that choice in public.
Russia is the largest exporter of natural gas into the EU. It represents nearly 43% of the EU's natural gas imports.
Then came the contract side of the story, which somehow makes the whole thing even worse. European regulators convinced themselves that spot markets represented sophistication and flexibility. Long-term indexed contracts started to look old-fashioned. Utilities were nudged, pressured, and sometimes outright pushed towards short-term pricing under the banner of efficiency. I watched that shift happen while people congratulated themselves for modernizing energy trade.
Moscow says it's been a reliable energy supplier to Europe and insists the continent could see record-high Russian gas exports this year.
Spot market exposure turned energy into a casino. Prices did what volatile markets always do under stress. They exploded. During demand shocks, gas prices surged nearly 6 times year over year. That number speaks louder than any policy memo. A system built on constant availability collapses quickly when price signals go vertical. Factories do not pause politely while markets recalibrate. Households do not enjoy financial theory when heating bills arrive.
Last month, Russian gas company Gazprom announced that the €10 billion pipeline Nord Stream 2 had been completed.
Storage levels tell the same story. Roughly 75% capacity heading into winter might sound acceptable in a spreadsheet. In reality, it sits well below historical norms for that season. Winter does not negotiate. Demand rises regardless of regulatory optimism. With storage already thin, the market reacted exactly as markets do when scarcity becomes visible. Prices jumped, fear spread, and leverage shifted instantly.
decision that we've made now to ban the import of Russian gas is a historic one.
Russia kept its long-term contract protections intact through this entire period. Europe dismantled its own price stability mechanisms voluntarily. That decision removed insulation against volatility and handed pricing power to whoever controlled supply at the margin. If this breakdown just snaps something into place for you, hit like, subscribe now, and stay here because this story only gets more uncomfortable from here.
Ukraine has warned Europe that Nord Stream 2 could be used by Moscow to exert pressure. The pipeline's also seen resistance from the United States.
Then we reach the part everyone pretends is purely technical, which always means it is deeply political. The ruble conversion mechanism did not require European companies to hand over rubles at the front door. That detail matters because it allowed endless semantic debates. Payments could still be initiated in euros or dollars. On paper, that looked familiar. In practice, recognition of payment only occurred after conversion into rubles through Russian financial institutions.
Russia could single-handedly push Europe into recession. Russia supplies gas to Europe through Nord Stream 1. This pipeline is now operating at just 20% of its capacities.
No immediate countermeasure emerged because gas supply continuity overruled everything else. That fact tells the entire story. When continuity becomes the overriding concern, leverage belongs to the supplier. Legal arguments without enforcement power become statements of discomfort rather than tools of pressure. Europe talked. Russia operated. Markets responded accordingly.
And Russia can never again use fossil fuels exports as a weapon against Europe. The path to this day has been long and it has been difficult, but we have to remember it's a historic outcome that we are here.
I look at this sequence, and I do not see a sudden humiliation. I see a slow reveal. Structural dependence, market exposure, clever financial engineering, and hesitant legal responses combined into a moment where power imbalance became undeniable. This did not happen overnight. It arrived right on schedule. I watched gas prices turn into a live scoreboard, and it felt brutal in its simplicity. Markets stopped pretending this was abstract policy and started flashing numbers that ordinary people could not ignore. Prices jumped more than 25% in single trading sessions, not once, not twice, but repeatedly during peak uncertainty. That kind of move does not whisper. It screams. Every spike told the same story. Someone had leverage, and it was not Europe.
Gas prices have been hitting record highs with supplies running low. European and UK gas prices surged on Wednesday by over...
I remember how fast those price surges rippled outward. Utilities panicked. Traders scrambled. Governments rushed to microphones. The market did not care about statements or reassurances. It reacted to supply reality. When prices move that violently in a single day, it signals fear, not confidence. It tells consumers and investors exactly who holds the upper hand.
Rising as the Northern Hemisphere heads into winter, a recovery in demand since pandemic lows has also contributed to rising prices, as well as a lack of storage.
Industry felt it immediately. Electricity costs surged and manufacturers absorbed the hit first. Fertilizer producers faced margins that evaporated overnight. Metal processing plants recalculated output because energy suddenly cost more than the product justified. These were not theoretical losses. Production slowed. Shifts were cut. Competitiveness slipped quietly while headlines focused elsewhere.
At present, Europe has about 3/4 of its natural gas in storage, which is much lower than normal for this time of the year. Gas prices are nearly 6 times higher than last year.
Households felt it next, and that was when politics caught fire. Energy bills climbed across multiple member states, and governments reached for subsidies like fire extinguishers. Tens of billions of euros were deployed just to keep people from revolting over heating costs. That money did not create new supply. It simply softened the blow. Inflation stayed inside Europe, contained but painful.
The Energy Agency and some in the European Parliament are accusing Moscow of intentionally limiting gas supplies to Europe. The allegation is that Russia restricts supplies to hasten the launch of Nord Stream 2.
Through all of this, exports from Russia continued. Gas kept flowing. Contracts kept settling. The inflationary shock landed internally, exactly where it hurt most. I could not miss the contrast. One side sold. The other side subsidized. One side collected revenue. The other side managed public anger. The scoreboard did not need commentary. That pipeline gave optional routing leverage independent of Ukrainian transit. Everyone involved understood that reality, even while dancing around it publicly. Optionality matters in negotiations. The ability to reroute volumes changes tone instantly. Europe knew it. Russia knew it. The mere presence of that alternative shaped every conversation.
Russia has never been a reliable partner. It manipulated gas flows to weaken governments and destabilize markets, most dramatically before invading Ukraine.
European divisions over certification weakened collective bargaining power. Some states pushed. Others hesitated. Consensus fractured. When unity breaks, leverage leaks away. That fragmentation mattered more than any single regulatory delay. Negotiations slowed. Expectations shifted. Markets priced in uncertainty again. Even without activation, Nord Stream 2 influenced market psychology. Traders priced scenarios. Policymakers measured risks. Energy planners imagined outcomes. A pipeline does not need to operate to exert pressure. Its shadow was enough. I saw how silence around it spoke louder than any announcement.
The good news is Europe has alternative.
The EU is taking giant steps towards a new era free of Russian gas and oil.
Sanctions were supposed to balance this equation, but they never touched the core imbalance. Financial sanctions targeted banks, assets, and individuals. Commodity leverage sat largely untouched. Energy remained necessary. Necessity rewrites rules quickly. Gas trade continued because replacement volumes did not exist at scale. Liquefied natural gas sounded reassuring in speeches. Reality intervened fast. Terminal capacity limited intake. Shipping availability constrained delivery. Infrastructure bottlenecks slowed everything down. You cannot replace pipeline volumes overnight with optimism. Molecules move slower than press conferences.
And Russia can never again use fossil fuels exports as a weapon against Europe. The path to this day has been long and it has been difficult, but we have to remember it's a historic outcome that we...
Europe sanctioned broadly while exempting necessity. That inconsistency mattered. It signaled priorities. Survival came first. Pressure came second. Markets read that clearly. Suppliers adjusted accordingly. Strategic inconsistency rarely stays hidden for long. What struck me most was how psychological the outcome became. Europe accused loudly while adjusting quietly. Systems were tweaked. Procedures were adapted. Compliance wore the mask of interpretation. Gas kept flowing because it had to. Public posture diverged from private action.